Recently, my son and I embarked on an exciting new chapter, moving to a different country to start a fresh, upscale life. This new beginning was made possible by an unexpected $12 million inheritance my son received. His grandmother warned him that if we were ever to part ways, the money might not suffice. Curiously, she insisted that if we wanted to remain in contact, I would have to humble myself to an uncomfortable degree. Confused by her harsh words, I questioned what she meant. Up until then, I had no idea about the plans to relocate or the existence of such a large sum of money. She coldly explained that they intended to live a luxurious life overseas, just the two of them, leaving me puzzled about why my husband would leave without a word and why this secrecy surrounded the money. Her demands for begging and humiliation, if I wanted answers, seemed exceedingly rude and unnecessary. I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, and worry all mixed. Despite this, I knew I had to remain composed and unravel the situation. How had my husband come into such a substantial amount of money, and what could be the implications? I have a significant role as a manager at a prominent tech company where I first met my husband. His vibrant personality was what initially drew me to him, leading to our marriage. His parents initially welcomed me with open arms. Together, we have a daughter who is now 12 years old. Growing up in challenging circumstances myself, I vowed to provide a loving and supportive environment for her while juggling work and home responsibilities. Then, a work project required my husband to move to Oklahoma. Facing the prospect of managing everything alone was daunting. "It's going to be tough managing everything without you," I admitted. He suggested that perhaps his mother could come to stay with us to help. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping it would ease the burden during his absence. "When is Daddy coming back?" my daughter asked, her eyes filled with the innocent concern only a child can muster. "He'll be in Oklahoma for a bit longer, but don't worry, Grandma is coming to stay with us," I reassured her, trying to mask my uncertainty with a smile. So, my mother-in-law moved in, and I had no idea this decision would lead to some of the toughest days of my life. Each evening, as I returned home from work, she greeted me not with warmth, but with sharp criticism. "Always working late, huh? Women who neglect their families," she would mutter, her words like needles. "I have a job too, and I take care of our daughter," I would counter, frustration simmering, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. "When I was young, family was everything. I never even thought about working outside," she'd reminisce, her tone dismissive. Then, one day, after my daughter had excelled at school, my mother-in-law declared, "It's all thanks to me. What's the point of you? Maybe we don't need you around." Her words stung deeply, especially since I was the one who tutored our daughter in most of her subjects. If I made even a small mistake while cooking, she was quick to criticize. "How did you and my son even survive before with such poor cooking skills?" Exhausted, I'd snap back, "I'm doing my best. Everyone has their way of doing things." My patience was running out, she would complain to my husband over the phone, pointing me in the worst light. "Mom, she's working too. Please try to understand." He'd mediate, his voice a soothing balm from miles away. The more we lived together, the more strained our relationship became. With my husband far away, I felt increasingly isolated. One night, overwhelmed, I decided to call my husband. "Hello, are you okay?" he answered, his voice sleepy. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just your mom gave me a hard time about the house chores again, and it's getting to me," I explained, the frustration evident in my voice. "I'm sorry. Mom's always been a bit sharp-tongued. Maybe she has a point, but don't let it get to you too much. Just keep doing things at your own pace," he comforted me. Feeling slightly reassured, I tried to return to our daily routine, but with my husband away, the pressure from my mother-in-law only intensified. Each day felt longer than the last, and I became increasingly exhausted. Eagerly, I awaited my husband's return, clinging to memories of him to cope. Initially, I thought I could manage, but her constant criticism became unbearable as time passed. From morning till night, she found fault in everything I did, leaving me overwhelmed and longing for relief. Even when I cooked my husband's favorite rice dish, my mother-in-law dismissed it harshly, commenting, "This tastes terrible. Who could eat this?" Anytime I paused for a short break, she would scold me, "How can a woman who can't even handle household chores take a break?" I was never particularly confident about my housekeeping skills, but my husband always shrugged off my mistakes with a laugh. In contrast, with my mother-in-law, I felt immense pressure to be perfect. I believe she treats me harshly because she adores her son immensely and hasn't fully accepted that he got married and moved away. This challenging experience has solidified my resolve never to become an overbearing parent like her. One day, after treating myself to a modest shopping spree at a local mall, I returned home to find her waiting at the entrance, furious. "How could you go out for fun when your husband isn't home? What about the household chores?" she interrogated. "I thought I needed a little break," I replied, but she dismissed my feelings, blaming all troubles on my supposed incompetence. Hoping for some support, I awaited a call from my husband, thinking his voice might uplift me. However, the news he shared was far from comforting. "I have some bad news. My work in Oklahoma isn't going well. I got into gambling and now I'm in serious financial trouble. I've accumulated a lot of debt," he confessed. Shocked and worried, I exclaimed, "Are you serious? Gambling and in debt? This is completely unacceptable. What's going to happen to our future and our daughters?" "I'm sorry, truly sorry. I feel trapped right now, but believe me, I'll figure it out," my husband apologized. Overwhelmed, I asked, "How do you plan to fix this? How much do you owe?" I had always viewed my husband as honest and sincere. He was punctual for our dates, always came straight home from work, and expressed gratitude for every meal I cooked or any laundry I did. His sincerity and honesty were key reasons I fell in love with him. But with him away and facing my mother-in-law's relentless criticism, life became unbearable. "I can't believe someone as useless as you married my son," she would say, her words cutting deeply, sinking my heart further into despair. Since my husband started working remotely, I've faced constant blame and criticism from my mother-in-law. His recent confession about his debts and gambling added heavily to my despair, making the weight of everything too much to bear. One night, overwhelmed by everything, I left the house and found myself crying alone on a park bench. Things only worsened when my mother-in-law brought up a long-buried secret from my past during one of our dinners. "So, I heard you used to work in a nightclub, huh? Shame on you for raising my grandchild after working in such a place," she sneered, her words cutting through the air. Shocked and embarrassed, I managed to ask, "How did you find out about that?" "I was telling an acquaintance about how useless my son's wife is and showed them a picture of you. They recognized you. Apparently you weren't even good at that nightclub job," she taunted. Before I met my husband, struggling for money and with no support from my family who never worked and only partied, I had taken a job at a nightclub. It was a secret chapter of my life, one I thought my husband didn't know about. Now, hearing my mother-in-law use it against me left me speechless. "I can't believe someone like you is the mother of my grandchild. I'll tell my son and have you kicked out," she threatened. Her words plunged me into deeper despair, making it feel as though all my efforts in our marriage and the future I dreamed of were being stripped away. Communication with my husband became rare, and I worried that he might start doubting me due to the seeds of distrust my mother-in-law was sowing. Alone in my room one night, I reflected on my life, meeting my husband, our marriage, and the ongoing struggles compounded by my mother-in-law's relentless blame and accusations. "I can't take it anymore," I whispered to myself, walking out into the quiet, desolate nighttime streets. The silence around me seemed to echo my despair. My mother-in-law's haunting words about my past and her relentless criticism became unbearable. I ended up on a park bench staring blankly up at the sky where not a single star was visible. My heart felt just as dark and empty. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "Mom, why are you here?" It was my daughter, her presence a sudden comfort. She sat next to me and took my hand. "Mom, don't let Grandma get to you," she said gently, her words a balm to my aching heart. Despite the turmoil, her simple act of kindness reminded me of the strength I had within me. We both knew life had been hard, and her recognition of my efforts, even if unspoken, was enough to remind me why I had to keep going. I worked at an international electronics company, and my job had always been a source of pride and independence, something my mother-in-law couldn't take away. As we sat there, the weight of her words began to lift slightly, replaced by a renewed sense of resolve. "You've been through so much, you're strong." "Thank you, but maybe Grandma has a point," I replied hesitantly. "Mom, Grandma's just stuck in the past. In today's world, you should be proud of any job you've done. I'm proud you worked at a nightclub," she reassured me earnestly. "Really?" "Yes, because it shows you've always tried your best for us no matter the circumstances. Don't let Grandma's words control you." My daughter's words touched my heart deeply, bringing tears to my eyes. "Mom, you're working hard in IT now, right? That's amazing. I'll always be on your side no matter what Grandma says." Her words filled my heart with gratitude. With my daughter's support, I felt hopeful that we could overcome any challenges together. Later, in my husband's study, I took a deep breath before diving into a pile of paperwork. I carefully went through each document, trying to uncover his secrets: bank statements, credit card bills, loan agreements. Slowly, my husband's financial situation started to make sense. Why did this happen? I discovered several receipts from gambling activities: horse racing, slot machines, and casinos. It was heartbreaking to think about how much money he had wasted on these activities. Next, I turned on my husband's computer. The password was his birthday, but reversed. His inbox was overflowing with collection emails from financial institutions and messages from friends demanding repayment of loans. Additionally, I found a lot of promotional emails from gambling-related websites. I decided to calculate how much my husband had spent on gambling. The total was a staggering $12 million, far more than I had imagined. Seeing that amount, I felt a moment of panic, but there was no time to waste. I started to plan how to secure funds to support our livelihood. I thought about my savings, the money we could get from selling our expensive electronics and luxury items at home, and the money I had saved from my salary. After that, I kept up with my investigation every day. I worked hard, reaching out to financial institutions to understand the extent of my husband's debts and obtaining his credit information. A few days later, I devised a plan. I started getting ready to build a life where I didn't have to rely on my husband or mother-in-law. Using my background in the IT industry, I decided to take on freelance projects. For several days, I built up a portfolio and signed up on a website for freelance jobs. Then, a few days later, I got my first request from a client. This work would help a bit with our living expenses and give me a sense of independence and control over our future. Amidst juggling freelance projects, I found time to meticulously review our household finances. I canceled any subscriptions we didn't need, trimmed unnecessary spending, and discovered ways to cut grocery costs, managing to significantly reduce our daily food expenses. Encouraged by tips from local moms, I also participated in a community yard sale where I sold some high-end items and surplus electronics, turning a tidy sum. A few weeks later, my freelance efforts began paying off, and I felt my income stabilizing. I had accumulated enough in my bank account to comfortably cover our living expenses. One day, upon returning home, I noticed all my mother-in-law's belongings were missing. Just then, my phone rang. It was her. "Oh, are you back already? You must have noticed our stuff is gone," she said. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, puzzled. "My son and I are starting a luxurious life abroad with his $12 million. If you ever think of divorcing him, you won't be able to make it on your own. If you want our new address, get on your knees and lick my shoes," she demanded. I couldn't help but chuckle at her words. "Actually, that $12 million is a debt," I informed her. "Stop joking, there's no way my son has that kind of debt," she retorted. "You may not believe it, but it's true. In his study, there are transaction records from banks and financial institutions, credit card bills, contracts, and more. Plus, on his PC, there are collection emails from financial institutions, messages from friends demanding repayment, and promotional emails from gambling sites. If you don't believe me, why don't you check? I suggested. You're lying, she exclaimed. It's the result of his gambling addiction. Horse racing, slot machines, casinos. All in all, it amounts to a whopping $12 million. I just sent you photos of the evidence. Maybe you should take a look, I said calmly, maintaining my composure. I had no idea. He probably didn't want you to know, but it doesn't change the facts, my mother-in-law finally admitted after viewing the evidence. As the reality of the situation sank in for her, I continued to reflect on how to tackle the massive debt. The path forward was daunting but clear. I needed a structured plan to manage our finances and possibly negotiate with creditors. This unexpected turn of events had thrown a wrench into our lives, but I was determined to navigate through this financial storm with or without their help. But I guess I don't have to anymore, I responded, the gravity of the situation settling in. There was a moment of heavy silence on the phone as my mother-in-law processed the shocking reality. I truly didn't know. I don't know what to say, she finally admitted. Without another word, I ended the call. From that moment on, I resolved to start anew. Despite the shock of my husband and mother-in-law's actions, I knew I had to move forward, not just for my sake, but for my daughters as well. Later, my husband called. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I'm so sorry, truly I am, he apologized. But my anger didn't subside. How did it come to this? Our family is breaking apart because of you. I never thought it would get this bad, but when I decided to go overseas with Mom, I couldn't see a future with you and our daughter, he confessed. His words stunned me. You couldn't see it's because of your recklessness and lack of planning that our family is in this mess, I accused. I understand that, but it's too late now. I made a promise to Mom, he replied. What promise? I demanded, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Want to sacrifice our daughter's future and grab a paradise just for yourselves? My husband finally admitted to the grim reality of his decisions. There was a tense silence before I gathered my words. Did you truly love our family? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I did, but now it's different, he responded, his voice breaking into tears. Don't hurt us anymore. My daughter and I are going to live on our own from now on. We'll forget about you, I declared firmly. There was no response from him, only the sound of his sobbing. Calmly, I hung up the phone. The entire mix-up began when a sudden bill of $12 million arrived at our home. My mother-in-law, mistaking it for a lottery-winning notice, began plotting to move overseas, blissfully unaware of the actual debt. My husband, thinking starting a new life abroad would solve his gambling debts, agreed to her proposal, compounding the misunderstanding. After that conversation, I set aside my anger towards my husband and started seeking legal advice. I was determined to prepare for a divorce, seeking compensation for emotional distress and child support. A new life was about to begin for me. A life where I could rebuild and provide a stable, supportive environment for my daughter, away from the chaos and hurt of the past. As I forged a path toward independence from my husband and mother-in-law, I consulted a lawyer to navigate the complexities of divorce, emotional distress compensation, and child support claims. During this turbulent time, my daughter and I grew incredibly close. She became my greatest ally, fully understanding my decision to divorce and choosing to stand by me. Her support was a beacon of comfort, making the difficulties we faced seem more bearable and filling me with gratitude. Meanwhile, life abroad proved challenging for my mother-in-law and husband. Despite their initial enthusiasm, they quickly encountered numerous obstacles due to their lack of preparation and ongoing financial issues. To compound their troubles, they were pickpocketed, losing what little funds they had left, and struggled significantly with the language barrier. Ultimately, their situation deteriorated to the point where they were deported for overstaying their visas. Back home, I worked through my lawyers to negotiate the terms of the divorce. The agreement was eventually finalized, and my husband agreed to pay a lump sum for emotional distress compensation and child support. "Thank you. Now I can finally begin a new chapter in my life," I said, a weight lifting from my shoulders. However, considering the practicalities of his financial situation, I suggested, "Wouldn't it be better in installments?" But he confessed, "I ended up taking on even more debt, borrowing money from some shady loan shark." I didn't probe further about his circumstances. By then, I felt detached from his struggles. After being evicted from her rental property and losing all her savings to pickpockets, my mother-in-law returned to the U.S. and ended up homeless. As for my daughter and me, we embarked on our new life. It wasn't always easy, but freed from the turmoil caused by my husband and mother-in-law, we could look to the future with hope. I was determined to live happily, working closely with my daughter, who had pulled me from the depths of despair. Together, we were building a life based on our strength and resilience, hopeful for what the future might bring.